So, ladies and gents, apologies for the delays. We had a few minor technical issues. However, we are up.
Jourdan, you want me to turn the light off? Would that bother you, or?
I mean, I think it would make it a little easier to see. So.
Okay, we can do that. And Jourdan, welcome to the Clark and Boyle Library.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. Why are you telling me document recovery? I don't want to recover any documents. I just want my documents.
Hit repair.
Repair.
Sounds
Hit present button. Here we go. So, becoming a writer, as we're all aware, is awesome. Now, does anybody have any preliminary questions or none to start with? Very nice. Okay, so howdy, folks. So my name is Jourdan Cameron. I'm the author of a book called Mesquare. It's a novella about a boy named Hilden Heganary whose parents thought he would be very ill. So what they did was they had a clone of him made because, you know, clones, easy organ transplants. Unfortunately, fortunately for Hilden, he turned out perfectly healthy and didn't need the aid of his clone's parts. Years later, however, he wants to meet this clone of his. So Mesquare tells the story of Hilden and how he comes to get to know this clone brother. It's an adventure, as I call it, of bioethics and brotherhood. And it invites readers to consider some of the ethical implications of human cloning, but the way that I wrote it was I meant to keep it as accessible as possible to younger readers. Now, I have written a few other things. I like to write short stories a lot. One of my short stories is called Josephine's Job. It's set in the world of Mesquare, but from another character's point of view. There's also White Bat, which was featured in the short story collection Pocket-Sized Yarns. And then there's a novel that I wrote some years ago, but it's very badly in need of editing, and I'm not going to bring it up here. So, in addition to my published fiction, I also work as a video game journalist. I like to write about games from both a critical and a business standpoint. I'm the editor-in-chief of blackmanandrobin.com. I also produce videos featuring games, but that's a discussion for another day. So, to get started, aka why I thought I hated writing. Now, when I was much younger, I didn't enjoy writing. It wasn't so much the writing as the process of writing that was just unfun to me. My hands grew tired, it cost me a lot of time, and to top it all off, my penmanship was sloppy. So it wasn't a good process. I could barely write legibly, so I thought that I hated writing. However, years down the road, I discovered something called Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia worked wonders for me, and it was because I discovered that Wikipedia that I realized that there's a real value to knowing how to write. I realized, hey, look at all this information that's here available for free, and I can contribute to it, but only if I'm able to write. So it was at Wikipedia that I got lots and lots of practice, and I came to love writing. It was simple and good practice I found in grammar, spelling, and style, because Wikipedia requires, well, at the time that I was writing there, required a neutral point of view. As of late, Wikipedia's kind of grown out of control, and they're a little bit less strict as to their writing style, but it's still technically supposed to be neutral. But it was there that I came to enjoy and appreciate writing, but that wasn't quite enough to make me an author. Why are you popping up? Okay, no. Everything changed when the high school nation attacked. Okay, so now that I've gotten that obligatory joke out of the way, it was in high school that I came to realize that I did have some talent as a writer. I was homeschooled for all but 6 days of my life, 7 if you count an event I attended at MIT. But it was during high school that I entered an online school. And so for the very first time, I had teachers grading my assignments. So they were telling me on my essays that I was doing well. I consistently received high marks on my essays, and I realized, maybe I have something going for me with this writing. So at the time I wasn't a great writer, but I had some ability. And so I got to work on that first novel that I mentioned earlier. And here we see that that's for my single day at MIT. Does that count as 7 days or 6 days in school? I'm still not sure. So we reach this chapter, Epic President Guy. It was around this time in my life that I joined my local library's writing club. And my writing club gave me lots and lots of valuable feedback. You know, this wasn't a really normal writing club. It was extremely loud. There was lots of talking, music was played in the background. It was kind of a confusing, it was confusing if you've ever been to another writing club. But in spite of this, it was a wonderful place because it helped shape me in an important way as a writer. It reminded me that I didn't have to be obsessed with the rules of writing. Those rules that I learned at Wikipedia, I could toss them aside. Of course, I would have to toss them aside with care. But the rules of being a writer, I realized, aren't really hard and fast rules. They're really just good ideas that are worth considering. So, how did I become an author? Well, it happened one night. To be a little more specific, it happened one night as I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, and a thought came to me. What does blood brothers really mean? I mulled the idea for a while in my head, and I came up with this kind of weird idea for a story about a man who discovers that this biomedical corporation has been using human cloning, so he puts it through an investigation, and he comes to discover that he has his blood brother there, that they've cloned him. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be awesome, and they're going to... Yeah, I didn't really have any idea where I was going to be going with this. But I kept going with the idea for some years, and eventually I came to this. Hang on a second. Where's that? Ah, Mesquare. But I always actually had that idea of the guy looking at himself in a tube for the cover of the book. But as you can tell, this isn't a grown man. So the original direction isn't where my story went. So while the concept stirred around in my head for some years after I had it, it went through many, many changes. And I'm not sure how it went from a fast-paced action-adventure drama about taking down a massive corporation to a heartwarming adventure about a boy whose parents had him cloned, but that's what it became. So through the years that I spent thinking about it, I realized that the book wouldn't be finished if I spent all my time just planning to have it done. I mean, I'm not Tolkien. I'm not writing the next Lord of the Rings. It was just a novella, but I just realized that I'd spent way too long just thinking about it and not enough time actually doing it. So I spent 6 months procrastinating. So starting in November of 2012, I began writing my as-of-yet untitled story. I hated the title Blood Brothers because it sounded like a lame 80s action movie, and I also thought about my brother myself, but I rejected that idea because it sounded like a self-help book. So in spite of not having had a title, I kept writing, and in May of 2012, my book was finished. Most of it. I had written a story, start to finish, but it was badly in need of editing, and so something else was still missing too. The thing that I discovered at the library, I needed feedback on this book. I mean, I knew that I had some ability as a writer. My mom told me so. But you know how it is when your mom tells you something. So the only way to be sure that my book was any good was to put it in print. So I went to a company that did small print runs and got a few copies of my book printed and bound. Now, the company I went to, I'm not going to mention them by name, but the quality of the books wasn't perfect. The glue was uneven in some places and pages fell out. But it was something. There was something special about having my books in print. It was the moment that I touched them that I felt like something had changed. I wasn't just a guy putting words into a glowing box, but I was at last an author. My books, these physical books, were a verification of my thoughts, and they were beautiful. So I got some good feedback from my readers. I gave these books to friends, family, members of a writing club, and I went forward with editing the book. Now, it took me 6 hard months of editing and procrastination to get it done, and I was in high school back then, so I guess I had something of an excuse as to my procrastination. And I had quite a bit on my plate, but looking back, I could have been a little more proactive about editing. So the next step was to put it in print, again, once all the editing was done, and November of 2013 came with a lot of things. There was the Book Fair in my hometown of New Milford, where I went and performed a live reading of my book and signed some copies, and I finished editing it, which was great, but the book fair was in 2 weeks, and I still didn't have it printed out. So there was a mad dash to get everything properly formatted, make sure that I hadn't misspelled my own name, or to guarantee that the page numbers would show up properly on every single page. I don't have adequate words to describe the chaos that was the weeks following up to the book fair. And yet, my book showed up on time. I don't know how this peaceful picture happened, but it happened. And so, my writing club showed up to the event, and everything went smoothly. I signed a bunch of books, I made new friends, and unveiled myself unto the world as a writer. Now, I didn't do everything perfectly. Yes, I should have procrastinated less. I should have planned more and stressed out about everything and everything a lot less. And yet, all things went off without a hitch. Footnote, results not typical, please do not attempt without adult supervision. But that's how I became a science fiction author. So, what comes next? Well, right now I'm working on a bunch of books. While I'm not writing a sequel to Mesquare, I am writing another book from another character's perspective. It's set during the events of Mesquare. It's going to be a more intense book, and that's all I'm going to say about it for now. So do you remember that first novel that I mentioned at the outset? Well, I have revisited it. It's very ambitious, and it needs a lot of work. It's a sci-fi fantasy sort of thing, but I'm very secretive about it for good reason. And one of the short stories that I wrote, Josephine's Job, is actually being adapted into a short film by a filmmaker. He lives way out in Europe. It's kind of a pet project for him, like a hobby thing, so I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. But thus far, the results look good. So, the 5 steps to writing a book are, step 1, think about what you want to write, just have some idea of what you want to go in there with. Step 2, get started writing and write it regularly. Step 3, edit. Step 4, question marks, because you're not, like, there's actually a fair bit more involved with regard to the editing. You know my mom, who I mentioned? Well, my mother actually gave me the title for the book, Mesquare, and she had a very big hand in editing it, which I'm very grateful for. She told me about all the stupid mistakes that I made, all the dumb continuity errors, so have somebody else look at your book. Feedback is crucial in between editing. And step 5, you have a book. Now, I do also have some sort of thoughts to share, that is, bits of advice. Step 1, start. Now, my first novel was way too ambitious, the unpublished one I speak of, but I'm happy that I got started it, because today I'm in a much better position to continue writing it. Right now I can finish editing it because my skills have grown with me. So don't worry about where your skills are right now. Worry about where they're going. If you don't use them, they'll not get past where they are right now. So my second piece of advice is to finish. This is actually Neil Gaiman's advice to everybody who asks him for some when it comes to being a writer, that you actually finish your stories. And I'm strongly inclined to agree with it, because many of the people who want to be writers, they have 1,000 abandoned story beginnings in a file on their computer somewhere, but they don't have they don't have a middle and they don't have an end. Tricky as it might be, just will yourself to finish something. It doesn't have to be the full-length, super ambitious novel that you don't have a good idea for. Just get started and get finished with a short story. Tell stories and finish stories. And my final bit of advice is don't worry about what other people think. Write what you love. That's not to say that you should disregard feedback. Feedback is absolutely crucial, but don't let anybody sully your creative vision. If your story is weird, roll with it. That first novel that's still sitting unpublished, it's weird. It is really weird. It is living computer made of rocks weird. I can't make this up. But for perspective, does a story about super intelligent apes turning the world upside down, riding horses, and wielding machine guns sound absurd? Well, I mean, it happened.
Yeah.
It happened, and it's making millions of dollars, and it's Hollywood for you. But it doesn't matter how weird or unusual your story idea seems to be, just go with it and work it. And you might not be ready to put it out tomorrow, but keep working on it, keep working on telling stories, and one day your story about machine gun wielding apes on horses destroying San Francisco will be ready. So yeah, so that's it that I have to say. Does anybody have any questions with regards to writing? I'm an open book here, folks.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. But yeah, like with regards to the publishing process, or like any of you guys writers in the audience today? Short story writers?
A little bit. Sure.
A little bit, yes, very good, very good. What sort of stuff do you guys like writing?
Just anything. Like usually, I'm writing for a school literary magazine, So it's, I don't know, so it's just anything that I come up with.
Oh, it's really cool. Actually, in my library, in my days as Epic President guy, I was the editor-in-chief of the Aura. That's New Milford's Library's literary magazine. And we take contributions from like the various club members. And so it was my job to like do the covers every single month. But yeah, that's fantastic that you work for a literary magazine. Very nice. You write as well, or do you?
No.
You guys?
She's
Sounds
a
like
reader.
summer. Well, have you guys been thinking about books in general, like publishing, or
No, not really.
not in particular? Oh, I have a question. Yes, Mom.
It's not a question, but you directed the question to the young ones there, and somebody said they're readers. Readers make great writers. You
Yeah.
guys lived at the
Yes.
library. Your first library card was before you were a year. And so the more you read, the better you write.
I concur. That is very important. And not just to read in general, but like, well, actually, yeah, yes, to read in general. Read everything you can get your hands on. It doesn't matter how weird the books are. Like, I remember actually one day I was very curious walking through the library, and so I walked into the children's section. And I was young at the time, and I took out a book on what happens when your parents get divorced. And so I saddled on up to the librarians to check out this book. And I will never forget the hurt that was in that woman's eyes as I was checking that book out. And my mother had to explain quickly, no, everything's okay. We're not getting divorced. But I mean, like, reading the book gave me a little more perspective on what those kids would be going through. And so I'm slightly more equipped now to write a character whose parents might be going through some difficulties. But the more you read in general, the more you're going to benefit from it. Oh, yes? Sister?
So, for people who like to read a lot, but haven't necessarily gotten into writing, what kind of benefits do you think comes from writing, even if you're not really a writer before? Do you think it benefits people to start?
Absolutely, because when you start writing, you start noticing little things in the books that you're reading, and it changes the books for you. You're like, wait a minute, so when the author said this, he was probably thinking that, and you might be right, you might be wrong, but it's nice to have something about like that to consider, you know? So yes.
You said you were homeschooled, right?
Oh yes, I spent
Will
all
and
but...
Helen are both homeschooled.
Oh, really?
Yeah, these two right in front of you, they're both
Oh,
homeschooled.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice to have fellow homeschooling alums on the audience then. Yeah, actually, first book came out in high school, hadn't yet graduated. Now that I've graduated, I'm still working hard as an author and such, journalist, you know. But yeah. Yeah, I definitely say, it's interesting, my mother, when I was a lot younger, she was the one who made me like write in a journal manually when I thought that I hated writing. And I would say that there was some benefit to it, because even though I absolutely hated the process, I did get just a wee bit of experience there. It was helpful. So yes, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, so what do you guys like reading anyway? I like knowing.
Fantasy.
Oh, fantasy. Like what's like, are you into like Tolkien or Lewis or
I read Skullduggery Pleasant.
Skullduggery Pleasant? Oh, who wrote that series? Is this a series or?
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, it is a
It's
series.
a series. It's a series.
Oh, what's it about?
It's about a skeleton and a girl keep fighting evil and
That,
saving the world.
that sounds like just the right title for it, Skullduggery, you know.
And books have changed a great deal too from, in modern times, that's the
Oh,
theme, that's
yes.
the kind of books that kids want now, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting the thematic changes that have taken place in kids' literature over
Yeah.
the years. It's weird. We went from like uber dark, the Brothers Grimm, to this like period of literature when we're like, okay, shield the children. The Grimm
Yeah.
brothers never happened, kids. You can forget about that. To we're kind of easing back into like the Grimm. Actually, one of my biggest inspiration, like this guy held big influence over me as a writer. His name is Daniel Handler, better known as Lemony Snicket. A series of unfortunate events. That sculpted me as a writer. His books were kind of dark
Yeah.
and humorous. It's a very interesting series. I recommend it regardless of your age. It's about these three orphans who they're to inherit a massive fortune, but somebody's on their trail, and it's like this villain named Count Olaf. He's constantly after them. And so they're going from adoptee to they're constantly getting adopted, and the people who adopt them keep getting murdered, quite terribly.
Yes.
It's a pretty dark series, but it's a very interesting one. It shaped me as a kid. So. Oh, yeah.
I read that.
Oh,
with my
fantastic.
friends. There was like a competition who could read them all first.
What was your favorite? I gotta know.
I liked the really nice, like, scientist kind of like biology guy. With, like,
Wait, was that
animals.
Reptile Room?
Yeah.
Uncle Monty, yeah. Oh, yeah?
I like this big. I remember when I was little, I'd never read the books. I tried reading the book and it just didn't click. But I watched the movie. I liked the giant snake.
Oh, yes, the Incredibly Deadly Viper,
Yes.
which was actually a misnomer. Yeah, what's also funny, I like that, like, Stuke doesn't insult his kid's intelligence. Like, that's another thing. When you're writing for a young audience, they're going to know if you're looking down at them. But no, Stuke, he went out of his way to explain what words meant if they wouldn't have been immediately obvious to younger readers, but he didn't do so in a way that made you feel stupid, which I appreciate. Yeah, Stuke was a big influence. I read a lot of Redwall, even though that doesn't seem to have carried over. I don't know why. The descriptions of food in those books were amazing. Yes. Well, it's been oh, yes, Mom.
I was just wondering if you have, I know you're very late, but do you have time to read a little excerpt?
Oh, you know, I absolutely should do that. Let me just, apologies, I just have to whip out a book here. One of my favorite parts. Go. Yeah, my favorite part in my book is one of the creepier bits that I had written in. It was sometime around the time that our protagonist gets to meet this clone brother of his. He is in this, what do you call it? Oh, right, he's reached this, now, in my book, the name of the organization that's cloning people is called Stuke. The origin of the name is kind of funny. I stole it by reorganizing of the letters in Quest, as in Quest Diagnostics. Yeah, the medical company. I was like, what can I do to make Quest Diagnostics? How can I make an evil-sounding medical company? Just rearrange the letters in Quest Diagnostics. That makes perfect sense. But yeah,
You might want to stand here so you can all see.
oh yes, yeah. Just want to get my music organized. So I like, you know, that was my hallmark in the writing club. I always played music, and they nicknamed me Epic President Guy on account of the fact that my music was usually epic dramatic music, and it would sync up perfectly with my readings. I couldn't do it on purpose. The sync just happened, it was wonderful. But let's see which one of you is going to get the music first. OST, come on. Now, oh, looks like the laptop is winning. Here we are. Now, is it loud enough to be heard? It's loud enough to be heard. Here we are. Okay, so I'll just get a little rested. All right.
Here we go.
While the man stood there screaming about his eyes, I ran out of the room and down the hallway. I managed to get myself lost again. I was in another hallway that was just like all the others when I stopped to catch my breath. I could hear my heart beating. I could feel my blood pumping through every vessel of my body. It was like being on the inside of a tremendous drum. I felt like I was going to vomit. That's when I heard footsteps coming down the hall. They were heavy and loud, and I had a strong feeling that I knew whose they were. I looked around quickly and tried, running quietly to a door on the left side of the hallway. Somehow it was open, so I got into the room, shut the door, and waited. It was too dark for me to see anything, and my eyes weren't adjusting. Were they adjusting? I couldn't tell because I was too busy trying to get my heart to slow down so that he wouldn't hear it, and maybe, just maybe, he'd pass by the room. I took a deep breath and listened. I heard a few loud, fast steps and a bang. I heard the same thing a few seconds again, and at first I thought he was shooting at random. It soon became apparent that he was slamming doors. I could feel the vibrations as bang, bang, bang. Closer. I had the feeling he was opening doors looking for me and then slamming them shut, but I wasn't totally sure. I wanted to give up and forget all about Stuke. I didn't care about George anymore, and I didn't feel anything but anger. Why was I so stupid? Why did I make my parents take me to Stuke? It wasn't fair. I was sitting in a dark room, leaning against the door and hugging my knees, waiting to die. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Shutting my eyes tight, I waited for the door to swing open. Please, just trust me, you weren't supposed to... I felt something heavy smack the other side of the door. Then there was no more sound. I waited for a few seconds, confused. I definitely heard the man's voice. I tried opening the door and felt something blocking it. I shoved as hard as I could, and slowly, it opened. I looked around the door when I got out and spotted a patch of pink skin surrounded by hair. The man was lying there. I looked away quickly. I didn't want to know what happened to him. I looked down the hallway and saw a man standing at the end of the corridor, staring at me. You lost, kid? It's like I was wearing some sort of t-shirt that said, I'm lost, in big red letters. Who are you? The man walked toward me. He was wearing a white turtleneck and black jeans. He had brown skin and short black hair. He was pretty tall. My name's Richard. What's going on? You want to know what's going on, kid? They tried euthanizing me like a sick animal because I threatened to talk about what's happened to us. That's what's going on. Wait, do you mean they were going to kill you? What do you think? Did you get hit in the head and forget what happened in the last... Wait, who are you? My name is Hilden. I told him about how my parents told me what was going on at Stuke, about my meeting George, and about how I wound up here in this room in the dark. Well, Hilden, here's what you need to know. The higher-ups at Stuke have already fled the country, and now their lackeys are cleaning up the mess. They tried to throw me in the incinerator, and I woke up in a body bag full of chloroform after our mutual friend ran out of the furnace room. He must have been looking for you and didn't notice me following him. It took me a moment to wake all the way up, but I heard him screaming about his eyes. What happened? I sprayed him with this, I said, holding up the bottle. Creative kid. I just don't get it, though. Why would he try to kill you? Yes, that's my book.
Now, is your next book young adult?
Yeah, next book is going to be young adult. It's actually aimed at a slightly older audience than Mesquare. Yes.
Cover art on the book.
Oh, cover art. Actually, that's an. This cover art is actually work of my sister, Cassidy Cameron, who's in the audience today with us. She did a fantastic job. It's funny. She actually works as an artist professionally now. She's what? You're 15, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't off by any years. Yeah, she's 15 years old, works as an artist, and she's done cover art for a couple other people. But yeah, my cover art was the first she did, and it's fantastic. She's always had a talent for writing, you know. She's oh, yes?
Nothing.
But yeah, the next book that she's actually hard at work on one of my other books. I neglected to mention, I'm working on an adaptation of a classic fairy tale. I'm not going to say whose it is. I will say that birds are involved, if that's a clue to any of you. And I made the whole thing rhyme, and she's hard at work illustrating it right now. It's like it's an unfortunately forgotten fairy tale about like self-sacrificing love and generosity. Hopefully I can get some kids to read it once it comes out.
Do you have any interest in doing children's books?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's my target audience for my next book. So. But yeah. That's the Offer Life 101, folks. Yes. Also, do we have a copy of this book in Bethany Library?
We sure do.
Oh, we do. Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's upstairs and,
Oh, very cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool, thank you. It was fun to catalog it and
Oh,
put it in.
okay, so let's see here. So Bethany. Oh. Very nice. Yeah. Also, it's interesting when you write a book. You know, here's the thing that a lot of people don't tell you: the hardest part isn't so much the writing. I gave it away. Isn't the writing or the editing? It's the marketing. It's the hardest part. Like I actually had these little cards made up, like postcards, and they were part of my initial marketing effort when I held the signing at my local. Goodness, I'm losing my thoughts now. Oh, when I held the signing at my local book fair, I had a bunch of those things printed out. And they have information about the book, as well as where to get the book, social media information. So if any of you guys, are interested in following me on Instagram, if you want to follow along the writer, go ahead. But doing that was a very, very good for marketing. So if ever you want to know how to market a book, step one, postcards. Why? Because the postcards are easy to pick up, they're cheap to make, and you can put a lot of information on them. So yeah, that's just a little bit of it. Marketing is like a whole, I could take up nights talking about marketing, so I'm not going to torture you guys with that.
Now, do you do anything else besides writing? I mean, can
Oh
that-
yeah, well I mean, whereas my work as a video game journalist,
Oh, okay.
that's
So
another fun job.
yeah.
I do a lot of video editing now, so that's a job.
It's hard to
in
get
itself.
started as a writer until you're.
Yes, that's another thing. If you want to write, don't write because you love money. Don't write
Right.
expecting to make any money out of it. Write because you love to write. If you keep at it, one day the money will follow. One day. What's the name of my favorite? In the words of the king, it is not this day that the money comes out. Oh yes.
Do you recommend that they, especially for the younger ones, that they do the book club thing through the
Oh,
library?
Absolutely.
Like really invaluable.
If you're, yes, the feedback that I got from my writing club was amazing, because not just like as far as telling you the technical things I could have worked on, but I mean just having people telling me, hey, you got this as a writer made all the difference in the world.
Plus the prompts that you do.
Yes, the writing prompts very good. If you don't know where to start, just Google writing prompts, and there are thousands upon thousands of writing prompts that will get you started if you ever want to know what to write. Yes. Well, has everybody had their pizza yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Like, you
You
guys have had your
haven't
pizza.
had yours yet?
I have not had my. The offer has to have his pizza at some point during
Right.
the night. So what you
And
have
we
my
can
pizza.
heat it for you unless you like cold pizza.
Yes, your name. And okay.
Is there a charge for the?
Well, I mean, I usually charge $10, but I'm feeling generous tonight. You guys can have them.
Sure.
Yes. Hey, to Anna. Any particular message you'd like from the writer? Or? To Anna. Thank you very much for coming. As you can tell, my handwriting is slightly improved. Now, are any of you guys like fans of John Green?
Yes.
Are you excited about the Paper Towns film?
Yeah.
Is he pretty good?
Oh,
Is he pretty good? I
I,
have not seen Fault in Our Stars yet.
you know,
The movie, I haven't seen it.
I've seen the film, read the book, and I have to say it was a good adaptation.